All right, now the recording has been set up. So this concept of research, design, and data analysis, I'm sure most of you have heard of it, but usually you see it at the stage of research reporting, research publications, and analysis of concepts on research. But today we are going to go through the basics of research, how they start from a research proposal to a research report, and how this is useful to us. So in the previous trainings, we spoke about the policy landscape and the frameworks, policy analysis and methods, and today we shall be talking about research designs. In the stages of policy analysis, there's a phase of policy assessment. And in policy assessment, sometimes we carry out some research to see how effective the policy was. So this is basically the rationale, one of the rationales why we are studying this concept today. All right, thank you very much. So the benefits of this research, why should you be concerned about knowing a little bit or something about research? One of the reasons why each and every one of us has to be concerned about knowing research is for the sake of, there are some grants which call for research proposals. And those grants usually, most climate activists keep them or even don't give them an eye. Yet these are one of the simplest grants to get, because you just make up a proposal, apply and get a research grant, and you carry out your research in your community. But if you don't know any concept about research, it will be hard for you to contextualize what this proposal would like you to write about, and how you can be eligible. So that's one of the reasons why this call is going to be important to you, most of you who are advocates in this climate justice. Also, another concept it can help us with is in policy analysis. Whenever we have policies in our communities, in our countries, and you want to examine how effective these policies have been, we can use research to find that out. Even in points of implementing projects in our communities, sometimes when you would like to know the feasibility of the project, will it be effective or has it been effective? Research can be something very, very helpful. Yeah, and you can keep putting your comments and questions in the chat. This basics thing I'm going to share with you it's sort of the framework most research proposals follow, but in different countries and in different curriculum, some places may differ. But mostly in the UK curriculum, like the one we use in Uganda, it's of this format. The first one is the introduction, the problem statement, aims and objectives, research questions, literature review, methodology, ethical considerations, and budget. So for all these things, we are going to understand them deeply as I use an example in studying, in examining them. The example I chose to use is an example of the policy on adaptation finance. This has been the same nerve we have been moving through from the beginning of the training. Later, another presenter will come on, or any other person from the audience can be invited to explain any of these points, but in an example in their own point of view. So we are going to start with the introduction or abstract. So before even you go to the introduction, every research proposal or research topic, a research project has a topic. The topic we shall use is the effect of adaptation finance policy on indigenous communities in DRC. I'm giving, for instance, if this policy was passed the previous year, and after 1 year, we are carrying out policy assessment, and we'd like to see how has this policy had an effect on the people of the indigenous people in DRC? The first thing you start with a topic. So you set up your topic as clearly and as simple as possible. We have seen topics which are very long as a paragraph, but it's encouraged that policies are kept as short as possible. The next is the introduction. What is the use of an introduction? Introduction, it's where you talk about the major subject of the topic. In this topic, in the example of a topic I'm using is the effect of adaptation finance policy on the indigenous people. So in your introduction or abstract, you'll have to highlight who are these indigenous people in the DRC? Where are they? And what is adaptation finance? How does it relate to them? Like basically, you're helping the reader to understand the background or the genesis of what you're writing about. But in this effort of painting a picture for the reader, you please make sure you don't write too much. Maximum you can keep it to 1 page or 2, because once your research proposal is too long, it's possible that your target audience or your supporters or your funders may not read it to completion. So in this point of the introduction, you keep it as simple as possible, but you make sure the reader can get a fair picture of who are these indigenous people, where are they, what is adaptation finance, and how these people have responded to the previous policy, like sort of painting a fair picture of how it is. Next is a problem statement. A problem statement is because for you to come up with a proposal that, let me say, I would like to carry out a research in this area, meaning there's something you've seen which is not good, but you need something factual to back it up, to back up what you've seen. I hope that makes sense to everyone. You can send a message in the group for me to know if that makes sense to you. So a problem statement, let me use another example, which is not technical. For instance, if in a community, there is a disease outbreak, but you're writing to a funder for a proposal on carrying out research on this disease, you assume the funder doesn't know anything about that disease. So in the problem statement, you're trying to write, in this community, from this year to this year, over this number of people have fallen sick, these have died, blah, blah, blah. And because of this, that's why I'm intending to carry out a research in this area. So a problem statement paints a picture of how the problem is. It's putting the reader in your shoes so that they can feel exactly what you're feeling. Now, in this context of the indigenous people and adaptation finance, once the reader reads through the problem statement, the reader has to get that feeling of the state of the indigenous people in DRC, how adaptation finance has not worked for them, or how they don't know about it. Like sort of you paint the exact picture you want, but the picture you're painting must arouse the emotions in the reader to feel exactly how the people suffering with the problem are feeling. Yeah, that's something about the problem statement. Then after the problem statement, we go to aims and objectives. But something I would like us to know that in a project proposal, it's like you're proposing. So you write with the future tense. It's something you have not done, but you're proposing. I will, we will. So words like will are common in a project proposal. For instance, if now our topic was to examining the effect of adaptation finance on indigenous communities in DRC. So the objective becomes to examine. The objective is derived, the major objective is derived from the topic, to examine the effect of the adaptation finance policy on indigenous people in DRC. So to add a future tense in this, you can say the major objective of this project proposal will be to examine, because it's something that you're proposing that will happen. So that's how a major objective is stated. Then after major objectives, that you break down your major objective into either 3 or 4, but not beyond 4 smaller objectives. And after I go through these all stages, we shall go through them backwards, so that you can understand that to make a research proposal easily, you have to start with the end in mind and you work backwards to the proposal. I don't know if that makes sense, but it usually works easier if you work it backwards. So if I'm assuming if a community got adaptation finance, let me say they say this community will be given adaptation finance to do this and this and this. And some of the things that adaptation finance can do is building dams, setting up community projects, also capacity building activities. So for you would like to examine that effect. So all these 3 smaller objectives are derived from the major objective, making them to examine the number of dams that were built because of adaptation finance, to determine the number of capacity building sessions, blah, 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 to determine the number of community projects that have been established, etc. So you observe all these smaller objectives are sort of subsections of the major objectives, meaning once you have your major objective, you can determine and say which things can help me measure adaptation finance in my community. Let me use another example, which is not like adaptation finance. For instance, if your major objective is to determine has there been a population growth in my area, you can decide by having a small objectives by number of pregnancies per month, to determine the number of pregnancies per month, to determine the number of safe deliveries per month, to determine the number of stillbirths per month. So all those smaller things you're studying, you know they all feed into the big thing. No, meaning if there are more births per month, if there are more safe deliveries per month, if there are fewer stillbirths per month, it all leads up into a population increase. So from the objectives, you go to research questions. Also, these research questions, they stem from the smaller objectives. If the small objective was to examine the number of dams which were built, meaning the research question will be how many dams were built as a result of adaptation finance. And if the other objective was to determine the number of capacity building sessions, that will simply mean the research question will be how many capacity building sessions were carried out. This I've tried to simplify the steps in research as simple as possible, so that we are going to go through them again with another example, so that we can easily know the flow of these from objective, research topic, research question to the end. Then the next step is literature review. In literature review, it's like you're studying what other scholars have done. In this topic of research, we believe you're not going to reinvent the wheel. You'll be studying what have the previous researchers done, and what are you also going to add on. For instance, if other researchers in the evaluation of adaptation finance, they studied countries like Nigeria, they studied Uganda, they studied Botswana, but you've observed they've left out countries in war-torn areas that will offer you a research gap or a knowledge gap, and it can be a point of building on. If also you observe that even as the previous researchers have studied keenly adaptation finance and indigenous people, but all of them are not explaining how this finance and the indigenous knowledge can be brought up together. That's a research gap for you. So the literature review helps you to acknowledge what other people have done, and also build on what you can add on the existing knowledge. Yeah. Then the next one will be a methodology. Methodology is sort of how the research design is. These are just short words, but they're like big topics under them, but we can't go through all of them now. The methodology, we talk of a research design. How is your research going to be? Is it going to be a long-term research or a short-term research? How I like that is as like a simplified form of a research design, but there are so many types of research designs, like longitudinal, cross-sectional. But in simplicity is someone could decide that his research design is going to take a period of 3 months. Another person, 3 years, something of that sort. Then data collection methods. How are you collecting your data? If among your objectives is to find out how many dams were built, how are you going to get the data on the number of dams which have been built in these indigenous communities? How are you going to determine the number of capacity building sessions which have happened in these indigenous communities? Then also in this same section of methodology, we go to data analysis and methods. You can decide which type of data am I mostly getting. I'll just explain 2 types of data for the sake of simplicity: the qualitative and quantitative data. The qualitative data is data which is, I'll say, in form of words, then quantitative data in form of numbers. For instance, if you would like to find out the number of dams, all your answers will be in like 4 dams, 5 dams, 3 dams. Then if among your research you also would like to know what is the color of these dams, I'm giving an example, or what is the race of the people in that community, or what is the tribe of people of that community, the answers you're going to get will be black, white, blue, yellow. So answers which are in form of what are called qualitative data. So all these things influence the kind of research design you're going to use. Yeah. Then the next thing, you must have a budget, because all these things you wouldn't do them with your own money, but of course you would do them with support from a funder. So why is this important to us? I'll just repeat this for the people who have just joined. Like this concept of research is good, first of all, because it has a lot of funding and support out there, the field of research. But you'll observe that of all the advocates you know in your country, very few are benefiting from this field of research. And yet you're actively participating in this field of climate justice, but you see that the people benefiting from it financially in the line of research are people who don't know anything about climate change and stuff. So it's like a vacant area for you to study more and learn more how you can carry out research, which is not on your money, but you apply for research grants. So we have gone through the first stage of project proposal. So after I write a project proposal, the next step is when they accept your proposal, you carry it out and you have a project report. The project proposal, we observe, is always in a futuristic tense. That I will do this, I will find out this is how I'll do it. But a research report, since you're doing something in the past, you say, we observe that the climate policy benefited this people in this way. There are about 50 dams which we got. Of these dams, 30 were found working. So those are the few differences between the proposal and the report. The proposal and the report. So we are going to go back to the beginning. I've gone back to the beginning. I've explained this thing all through, but I would like someone to give me, people to suggest some things in the chat so that I can explain these steps again, but with another example, not really an example of adaptation finance. So I think the moderator will help me to see which examples have come up so that I can explain this whole process again using a second example. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joshua. Personally, I've learned a lot about research and analysis, and I hope everyone has done the same too. So let's first see if there are some people who have questions. Oh, Tato's hand is up. Yes, Tato, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Ida. Thank you, Joshua, for the comprehensive presentation on research and data analysis. I think for the example that maybe we can try and dissect is on how to, identifying the gap that we have currently with analyzing UNFCCC mechanisms and protocols and identifying the gap. Like right now, how we have been able to identify as the African group and various youth climate activists, how we have been able to identify that a majority of these protocols or mechanisms are repeating history and are not necessarily beneficial for the marginalized groups and Africa, and how we can align ourselves within that gap to come up with draft instruments or draft papers to present forward and design our community programs or activism work. Thank you.
Joshua, I don't know if you heard what Tato said.
Yeah, hello, Tato. I didn't understand very well the question.
Okay, let me try and simplify it. I think I said a lot of things. I was asking the example that maybe we can try and do in terms of research, design and data analysis right now is the various protocols or mechanisms by UNFCCC and how us as youth groups, networks can identify the gaps and position ourselves in terms of drafting statements, letters to world leaders, and designing community programs. I hope that clarifies that. Thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think I'm going to get, we can go through, as people are bringing up more examples, I think let us try to say, to look at the role of youth in the UNFCCC process. Because we have seen mostly the involvement of youth is totally narrowed down much to mostly Yongo. So I'd like to see if someone would like to examine, I'm now using an example. I'm going to use that example thought process. If someone would like to examine that, has Yongo, what you'd like to find is Yongo representing the perspectives of all youth in all continents in the world, something of that perspective. Are we together at that point with everyone? You can just give a thumbs up. So we shall start. If you're going through that with the topic of finding out if Yongo is representing the points of all youth in the world or in all continents, we start by a topic. A topic you can make it up as long as it's bringing out that message. You can say how to determine the effectiveness of Yongo in representing the youth, the voices of youth around the world. I'm giving that as our example in the topic, okay? Earlier, it was the effect of adaptation finance on the adaptation finance policy on indigenous communities in DRC. But now, the example suggested is on Yongo. We shall say the effect of Yongo activities in the representing of voices of youth in the UNFCCC. So someone would like to examine, is really Yongo representing the voices of youth in UNFCCC? We start by a topic. So in the next thing will be your abstract. In your abstract, you'll describe what is Yongo and how has Yongo been in the past, and what is UNFCCC, how is Yongo and UNFCCC related. So in your abstract and introduction, you're trying to give like a background of this is Yongo, this is UNFCCC, for the reader to, when the reader finds these concepts in the next chapters, he'll be at par with whatever you're talking about in your proposal. The next is the problem statement. Because by the time someone brings up that topic to find out if Yongo is representing all voices equally, it will mean he has seen some anomaly, which he would like to back up with a fact. So a problem statement can be, someone can say that in the past years, Yongo was set up with a very good agenda to represent the voices of people. However, in this such and such a year, all the leaders of Yongo were from this particular part of the world, and those who were from this part of the world were not in a decision-making spheres. They were used in a tokenism manner. So you can paint your problem as clearly as possible in a problem statement, and you conclude, and this is why we would like to carry out a research, determine if Yongo is effectively representing the voices of youth around the world. Does that make sense? I'll need some feedback because this is a practical lesson, and if I get feedback, it can help me on how to move. Does that make sense, people?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Please carry on.
Pardon?
Yeah, Joshua, it makes sense. You can carry on.
All right, so let me continue. So that is the problem statement. You're basically telling the challenge you would like to see, the challenge that you have seen and you would like to be addressed. And the next will be the aims and objective. Your major aim will come from your objective, your major objective. Our earlier objective was to determine the effect of UNFCCC, the climate adaptation policy on the indigenous people, indigenous communities in DRC. So the major objective you add to, that will be your major objective. So in this case, since the example we have brought about is to examine if the research proposal will be to assess if Yongo has had a meaningful impact in representing the voices of youth around the world. So from that topic is where you derive your major objective from. Maybe it can be to examine the impact of Yongo on representation of youth around the world. So the next will be the smaller objectives. So you're going to give me some comments in the chat. What variables can you use to determine representation? What can help you say that indeed we have been representing or we have not been representing? Please put some answers in the chat. That will help us build on the next step. What variables can help you say that indeed we have been represented or we have not been? So please put some variables in the chat.
You can also raise your hand if you have an answer so that I can, you can go ahead and speak. I'll start. I don't know if people are being shy, but anyway, I think one of the variables we could use, we could say how many, like looking at how many youth in the different regions are representing their regions on the Yongo board, something like that.
Yeah, that's a good example. So if that's one of the variables you're going to use to measure, your other objective can be to determine the number of youths on the Yongo board. That is as simple as it is. So any other variable someone can suggest that can make him feel like have been represented? You can put a chat.
I'm going to start choosing from the participants. You're too quiet. There's one in the chat. So that was says to examine the participation of youth activists from the Global South. Then we have Evelyn Acham says, how many women or men are represented? Which regions are represented? Okay, I think you first start with to examine participation of youth from the Global South.
All right, thank you very much. I'll start with the first submission, which came to examine the participation of youth activists from the Global South. So on the objectives, now if your objective, I think you gave it out already as an objective. So your suggestion was direct to examine the participation of youth activities in the Global South. Then from Evelyn Acham, for her, she says she would like to how many women and all men are represented on the committee can help us see the representation. So that one will be like how many, to examine the number of men on the Yongo board, or to examine the number of women on the Yongo board. I think now we have about 4. So we shall go on with those ones. So you can observe that all these minor objectives, they also stem from a major objective. So if our major objective, we want to see if Yongo has had an impact on representation, the next thing will be, you look at which things can speak representation to you, and from them you pick out like 3 or 4 to become your smaller objectives. So from those small objectives, you go to the research questions. So now your research questions will be, how many youth activists from the Global South are on the Yongo board? How many women are on the Yongo board? How many men are on the Yongo board? Or if in your research objectives was like, from which race are the how many races are, I would like to determine the number of races on the Yongo board. So on the research questions will be, how many races are on the Yongo board? Something of that sort. Then the next will be literature review. You'll have to examine, in the past, has there been any scholar who has studied this concept of representation? How has the pattern been of representation in the past? And you highlight it. And when you put it, you simply mention the author. Like you can say, in 1992, such and such an author studied this concept in depth and found out that most UN processes are biased toward this part of the world, and people in this part of the world are rarely represented. That is an aspect of literature review. And if you're researching and you don't find it existent, you can write it clearly that in the past, we have observed that the concept of representation and Yongo has not yet been researched about. However, the concept of representation and UN was researched. And you highlight how it was with UN. Then you conclude by what you're going to do in line with representation and Yongo. So the next will be the research design. You have to determine, how am I going to collect my data? How long will my research be? Something of that sort, and timelines. Then the next will be reporting. So that's another example we have used to help us understand this concept of research. But I would like to urge all of you to know that this area of research is a very profitable area, although it's a very boring concept. But if you devote some time in it, you'll find that when they call for research proposals, 2 people will apply. And when you're among the few, you have a high chance that you'll be successful and you'll pass. And you don't have to know everything related to research. You just need to have like an understanding of it, that when you see such proposals, you can apply. When it comes to implementation, you can have support from experts. But it all begins from you having the background of it, so that even when you bring on experts, you keep it in line with what your work is. Yeah, I think in case there are any other questions or any other person who would like to go through this process again with another example, you can share. You can share in the chat. Then maybe another thing I talk about is data analysis, but it's a more technical part, and I think it may not it is hard to convey it just over a PowerPoint presentation. But I would like to just tell you that there are several types of data analysis tools which can be used to analyze both qualitative and quantitative data. So in this example that they gave of, let me say, how many youths are on the board, how many blacks are on the board, the answers you're going to get are in form of numbers, meaning the analysis will be in a quantitative form. But that question which was asking, in which countries are they from? What race are they? The answers are going to come in form of words, meaning they are qualitative answers. You cannot find it. You can find the average of age, the average of height, but you cannot find the average of sex. You cannot find the average of country. So data which is in form of words, it also has another form of evaluation. I think for now I beg to stop here, and I hand it over to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victor, for that insightful presentation. I've personally learned a lot, and I have a question. If I write my proposal and I like following the presentation that you have had for us today, can I send it to you and you give me feedback?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Okay, if like you've come up with a proposal, I can go through it, but not every time. I can't give you assurance that every time I'll go through it. But there's a lot of knowledge on the internet. Because sometimes I can give you feedback, but I wouldn't like it to be limited to the feedback that I'm going to give you. But the advice I can give when you're making a research proposal, keep it as simple as possible. Because even the people who approve grants, their technical things get boring to them. Yeah, so whenever you come up with a research proposal, you can reach out to me and ask me, but you don't take me as the
Oh, sorry. So there's a question in the chat. Joy Kowet says, can you send some links? I don't know what links exactly you mean. Maybe could you clarify on that before Joshua comes in to reply? Joy, personally, I still don't understand your question, but maybe you could go in and answer.
Oh, thank you very much. Personally, these are notes I made, but I can come up with some links and share. But maybe a hint I can give, maybe you might be wondering where can I start from? Like this can be too ambiguous for me. For instance, usually people are encouraged, you should start a community project, you should start this and this, you should do this for your community, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes you'll find out that you've thought of projects and a project has never crossed your mind, and you're feeling stuck a bit. But also our mental capacity is also a project. You can decide to choose a path of research. For instance, if you see in this year, let me say Climate 2025 is calling for proposals, researching around different climate solutions that can be offered. You can decide to research climate solutions in the light of indigenous people. So for you to make a research proposal, mostly if you're doing a research proposal for the sake of benefiting from it financially, not just to add knowledge to the internet, you start by searching out what are research grants looking for in this time of the year. And when you're starting, you can start by research proposals which are around with $15,000 to $10,000 if you're starting. Then you start growing over there. I wouldn't encourage you to start with a grant proposal of $100,000 because it may just discourage you. So I'll share some links, but also some things will be set up on the website and on the YouTube for Agape Earth Coalition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joshua, for that. And I think that personally, the first resource that I would go to would be the YouTube recording. All the trainings that we have are recorded and they are uploaded to the Agape Earth Coalition YouTube channel. So that should be your first source. And you can, if this is your first training, you can follow up on the former trainings we've had over the week. Yeah, thank you. So Tato, you can come in if you have anything to add.
Thank you very much, Ida, and thank you, Joe. I think we've learned a lot. One minor thing I wanted to add on ethical considerations when conducting a research is having voluntary participation, informed consent, anonymity, confidentiality, because we know that a lot of the work that we do ensures, for you to have a successful proposal, you have to ensure that you are not violating anyone's human rights on autonomy and beneficence and justice. So those are one of the things to always consider and do things the right way. Other than that, thank you, Joe, for such a wonderful presentation. We have learned a lot.
Thank you so much, Tato, for that. Just to add a bit on ethical consideration. So when it comes to research, especially on the topic Joshua first presented on for indigenous people, most of the time people just go in there and get relationships within these indigenous people and then start to do their research without necessarily getting consent from them. So I think that point that Tato just brought up is really important, that when you're going to do research wherever and whatever topic, it's important for you to get consent on it. Does anyone else have something to add or any questions? Okay. If there's nothing to add from anyone's side, I want to thank everyone for joining this training, the third training. And I think the last bit is to take a picture. So I think everyone has to turn on their cameras so that we can take the picture for the social media pages. Make sure you're following Agape Earth Coalition on Instagram and on Twitter. Yes. Okay. We're still waiting for a few people. Joy, Joshua, Sharon. As we're waiting for the rest to switch on their cameras, you're all looking beautiful. Smile. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Okay. That one has been taken. One more, just in case the first one you are not smiling. Hold on. One, 2, 3. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Have a good rest of your day and a blessed weekend. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Bye.